there's a few things I find fascinating I think you should know about. I've compiled a list of things I'm really inspired by right now and want to share with you. If you don't know about these, you're out of luck. No. Honestly, this is my attempt at indoctrinating you guys with my taste and share my inspirations, things that I'm excited about. If you do anything in the creative world, film, music, design, you'll know how fast trends come and go. You know, if I can show you something that you've never seen before that you like, whether that be music or films or a commercial, that's my job. These things change all the time. You know, next week, all of these could be different, and my opinion on these things could be changed, but there's a few things I think people just aren't talking about. The work that we see usually dictates the work that we make, and I can't stress how important it is to go out of your way to try to find things that you like, follow along with artists, and hopefully I can make the connection today because I see so many pivotal things happening in other industries that are echoing into the film world, into the YouTube sphere at large. And, you know, at the moment, I'm seeing all of these different microcosms of art and media and music all morphing. So my hope for you guys today would be to just help us build the bigger picture. Where are we at? Where are we going? What am I excited about? What should you be excited about? That's ultimately up to you. But yeah, let's get into hot takes and inspiration. Quick side note, if you're wondering, this is shot on the Laowa 9mm. This is the widest lens I've tried to shoot a YouTube video on. I just want to give us lots of room to play with graphics and things. So anyway, all right, let's get into it. First hot take, anamorphic is out. Oof, he said it. Don't get me wrong, I'm a connoisseur of anamorphic lenses, the anamorphic look. I think anamorphics in legacy films going back into the 90s, 80s, 70s will always be timeless. Don't get me wrong. I just think in the commercial world, it's a little overdone. And until I see it tastefully implemented, I'm gonna have a hard time changing my mind. I loved shooting on anamorphic lenses, but here we are. It's like you get all this shake, you get a little sun and sun flare, and all of a sudden you can't tell anything that's happening in the frame. Or what I think is even worse is like those filters that go over the top, and it's just like anamorphic. It's like the fake beam and bar that goes over the lens. I think you're better off just shooting spherical 9 times out of 10. You know, if it's not really well done, I personally think anamorphic looks better in a low light setting as opposed to having like a really hard beam getting a flare. It just distracts me from the image, to be honest. I can't even tell what's happening. I always say if you squint your eyes and nothing's happening, nothing's happening. The look of anamorphic for me isn't doing it anymore. I still think they're cool. I just think most of the time it's not done that well, and maybe if it was done better, I changed my mind. God forbid you shoot something anamorphic, you have a 21:9 frame, and then you're trying to crop it to 9:16 for vertical. That bleeds right into our next hot take, is that I think more things should be formatted for vertical. I think it's time we just start fully adopting it and shooting stuff vertical, because if most people are gonna see it that way, it might just make all of our lives so much easier. There's like the stands that are like, no, it's gotta be formatted perfectly and your eyes are supposed to see it at 16:9. It's like, well, nobody sees the work. Like, art only has meaning if people see it. And I think the best place for people to see it is on their phone. That's where distribution is. That's where attention is. I think it makes such a more interesting frame as well when you're able to fully utilize the sensor vertical. I've seen some guys do this on Instagram, and it just makes such an immersive frame, right? You get like a full depth of field look, something I like to call little person, big world, something that comes along with large format and medium format photography, where you have a wider field of view in a smaller frame. So you often get these compositions where the people are much smaller and it makes the world feel so much bigger. And I think that's something we could accomplish by just shooting native vertical. Like, I think it would be so interesting and so engaging, and I just don't see it happening very much. I'm not anti-horizontal video. I just think, you know, we need to do what we need to do to make our work happen. So the next thing, hot take, I think crash zooms are dead. I think they were super cool for a minute and they were really in like a year or two ago, but now they just make me think of The Office, right? I just think of like a hard crash zoom. Everyone's doing it. Oh, the New York City streets, boom, punch into the window. Like, it's a little overdone. And I think at this point, when something's overdone or something becomes like, you know, crash zoom core, the moment it's labeled is the moment it's out the window. Yeah, and until I see a really tasteful crash zoom, it just feels cheap, in my opinion. You won't be seeing me incorporating crash zooms as a camera technique in my project. So the next thing I think is in at the moment is really long takes in commercial work. Oh, long takes. Like, yes, every movie in existence has longer takes, but I'm seeing this as a trend in commercial work, and I'm really loving it. Just letting us live inside of a frame, saying, nope, we're gonna be right here. All right, I've actually got an example from a New Balance spot that I really liked recently. I'll throw all the credits and everything up so you guys can check it out. Yeah, I love the way that we just sit and live on the characters in every moment. We're just kind of watching the scene unfold. Everything's cohesive. It's not this giant montage. It's not jumping back and forth between things. We're just living and exploring what the director wants us to see. And I love it. It's so simple. It's not flashy. It goes against the grain. And I think what's great about this is it allows the director to really communicate one idea, as opposed to saying, oh, here's this montage, here's everything that's happening. We're gonna live in this moment, and this is what you're gonna see. And I think we're just gonna see more of this because it is a break from the super fast, super quick kind of montage. And I think it's refreshing. I think this is great. I would love to see more of this. So at the end of this, they're utilizing the Ember or the Phantom or just any really slow motion camera to stitch these frames together to show one event happening, swapping from person to person. And I thought this was just a really unique, fresh take on the work. Absolutely love this. Just wanted to show this off. Next hot take. Flash cuts are dead. Ooh, oof, oof. Stab me through the heart. That is the basis of a lot of my work, circa like 2021, 2022. The quick kind of quick cuts. Oh, shot on film. Oh, bro, we gotta chop the film and do all the flash frames. I actually have this like full tutorial where I break down exactly how I do it just in real time from a current edit I made. And don't get me wrong, when it's done right with the right sound design, I love it and it's perfect. But I feel like at this point, it's kind of becoming gimmicky. It's more of an effect than a device. And I think if it is to be done, it should be done very minimally and not as the basis for the whole edit. I think it allows people to kind of bat out of their league when it comes to editing. Ooh, we're throwing stones now. I think a more tasteful way would be to have these longer holds, quick cuts when you need them, but not rely on them. I think until we kind of like pump the brakes on it a little bit, I don't know. We'll see how this one plays out, to be honest. All right, the next one I think is out is vignetted voiceovers. Ooh, interesting. For the longest time in the commercial world, we see what I would call a vignette, right? It's like a highlight on one person. This could be an athlete, a musician, and when they're talking the entire spot or the entire YouTube video or the entire piece, I kind of feel like they end up saying nothing, and I feel like stripping some of the VO back a little bit, if it's a vignette, is the way to go. I think when people are talking the whole time, it kind of feels like this like Alan Watts motivational, like, I don't know, I feel like I'm like drudging through a piece when I would rather have these moments, a few things said really well, and then we just kind of live with it and we see what we need to see. And I just think people are not used to sitting and really reveling in something. And I think we see it so often that the 2-minute voiceover ends up just diluting into nothing. It's like, I don't know, it just feels like noise. All right, enough talking about some of the things that are out in the video world. Let's talk about something that's in hyper-realism, specifically in 3D. And obviously, the more realistic, the better, blah, 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 blah. But I'm seeing these really interesting spots come out where the director's breaking the fourth wall. But it looks hyper-realistic. The entire scene is CG. And if you see in this spot, right, we're getting this like behind-the-scenes look at a car spot, and it's all 3D. The whole thing is 3D, which I think is super interesting. It's like meta-modern VFX. We're getting a step outside of what the VFX is to make it appear almost more real. And on top of that, the actual work looks hyper real as well. I think we're getting used to VFX and we're able to see when things don't look real. They kind of have this like AI softened, or there's like a lack of details in the shadows kind of feel. And I think it's getting easier to discern when that's happening. If you're not on the 3D train or trying to incorporate some of this 3D stuff in your work, especially as a commercial director, I mean, dude, you missed the boat. No, and there's always time to learn stuff, but it's here. It's happening. I don't know a single project that isn't using 3D or VFX to some degree to amplify the work. And if it's not, it's on purpose, right? It's more narrative driven. And I think these are just incredible pillars to try to help us be more intentional with our work. Just understand why we might want to incorporate certain techniques into our work versus not. Another trend I'm seeing in VFX, and this kind of touches on a larger topic that I want to get into, but going back to the hyper-realism thing, photogrammetry has been a technique that's been in for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and I played some part in trying to incorporate it into my work. Nerfs in particular, or Gaussian splat point clouds, which in my opinion is just the lower barrier of entry way to put photogrammetry into your work. I think it was really trendy a year or two ago when looking at RL Grime used it in one of his videos, and it was so well done and everyone loved it, but I think it's really out of style now. I think it's kind of the lowest barrier to entry VFX. I just think it's out. I think what's coming in is more advanced 3D scanning techniques. So utilizing actual photogrammetry, actual geometry in Blender, Cinema 4D, and really leaning into these more artistic, creative aspects of photogrammetry that we haven't seen before. The point I'm trying to get at this in the last couple of critiques is quality is always the pattern interrupt. Something I've seen over years and years and years is this kind of adherence to the least common denominator, where back in the day, back in the travel world, you had the Luma fades, and you see the same thing with film emulation, right? Everyone's slapping on their 35mm power grades, and it just allows them to hit out of their league to make something that feels a little bigger. Do I think this is wrong? Do I think there's anything wrong with it? No. But I do think these things become trendy for a reason, and there's a reason that it catches on and everyone starts utilizing it. There's nothing wrong with following trends. There's nothing wrong with implementing and evolving our ideas. It's more about just understanding, you don't want to be the last guy standing and all of your skills are leaning against a 35mm power grade when it's kind of gone out of style, or when you're utilizing very simple VFX techniques and yet the thing that's in and the thing that really makes your work stand out and what makes it timeless is trying to better understand certain techniques and editing techniques that aren't going to make our work feel like fast fashion, but that we'll look back at in 5 years and go, damn, he still got it. This is still in. We can, and also too, it makes me think about, leaning into some of these inspirations helps us understand where things are going, how we can actually be on the bleeding edge, but innovate on the bleeding edge, right? Not just pick the lowest fruit on the tree and be like, oh yeah, this is really good. I'm in it. I'm doing it. We're here to make great work, and all of these things, I'm not bashing anything, I'm just making observations. Piggybacking off of our hyper-realistic VFX, floating objects. Did floating objects ever actually go away? I don't know, everyone loves floating objects. But I think what I'm interested in as of late is leaning into the organic floating objects. I think this Alaskan Tapes music video did it really, really well, where the floating object in the scene is as much of a protagonist as the actual actor in the frame. And there's kind of a progression to these spheres being in the scene and what they mean. Going back to an older reference that I think was really well done of Solomon Lectelme's project where he featured the monoliths floating in the air. This has a kind of timeless aesthetic to it. The floating objects are protagonists in the scene. They actually affect a change in our character's emotion, in what we're feeling. And I think it's super important. It's not just a device. Thinking about 3D as characters in our work, how are they changing our perception of what's on screen? So not to go too deep here, but as of late, I've been digging back into some of these organic shapes. This to me screams Ash Thorpe meets Pax meets Anemia. Going back to some of Ash Thorpe's original work, who's an incredible hyper-realistic 3D artist or 3D generalist at large. I've really admired his work for a long, long time. Going back to his project Epoch 2, or even the McLaren 720S video he put together, is incredible. We're sitting and living in these kind of organic, breathing VFX moments that are just so obvious. It's so on screen. It's like the director is saying, you're gonna live here. And it goes back to the longer takes always being in, the hyper-realism, and pairing this with kind of all the other things I'm talking about. I'm just trying to connect the dots between what I like and where I think things are going in the commercial world. I've been playing around with this idea for a really long time. It's the difference between devices, effects, and gimmicks. So what I would define as a device is, in its simplest form, a deviation from reality, a deviation from the norm, the difference between us just filming a field and something floating in the field. For instance, in my commercial piece back in 2022, we started the spot with this push down between these two shelves, and the device I used is the floating cassette tape that comes on screen, full focus, boom, crashes right into the lens. And that to me is a device, right? Without that cassette tape, it would have just been reality, quote unquote, just a shot of something happening. Whereas we used something, a device, to create an elevated reality. Now, you could take this anywhere. This could be like a light sweeping through something. It's not reality, you're elevating reality, but the light itself, if I was to like sweep from the back or like do some like hard shadow on the face, that would be a device, in my opinion. So that's how I classify what a device is. Effects are things that are overlaid on the frame, but don't really affect the world that we're living in. It's more of something that's layered on top of reality as opposed to elevating reality itself, right? So we have devices, effects, and gimmicks. And gimmicks, you don't want to use gimmicks. Gimmicks are poorly done devices and effects, right? So you could kind of think of it as like +1 as device, neutral as an effect, and -1 as a gimmick, right? Of like something that adds to your visuals or takes away from. An example of a gimmick would be like if I just threw a directional blur on screen. Like, what does this do? It does absolutely nothing. For instance, if you like broke the fourth wall, right, and you like show the camera guy, right, it's not tasteful in the way that we saw the car breaking the fourth wall. It's just kind of like a gimmick, and if the editor or director chooses to put it in there, it doesn't add anything. Okay, so I think we always want to be aiming for a +1 or neutral when shifting our perception on something. All right, before we sweep this back around to other trends and things at large, I want to touch on music. Music is a huge part of my creative process. It's something that's been a part of my world since I was so little. The same way that I talk about these trends in film, I see the same thing happening in the music world. Really understanding what's happening in the underground, what's happening in the electronic scenes, how is that kind of shifting the mainstream appeal. I'm gonna start really broad on what I think's happening in the world, and then we're gonna go really deep and show you guys some stuff that's, you know, if you like these, awesome. If not, just tell me my music tastes are terrible. But all of these really, really excite me. So starting on the most broad, hold on, let me grab my headphones. Here we go. I think that we have successfully completed the entire life cycle of melodic house music. Front to back, there's this song Solitude by Keanler. And to me, I'll just play it. This to me is the closest thing I've heard to the Promise You EP from Ben Bomer back in 2016. It's got all the same vibes, all the same. There's actually a song I liked the other day on SoundCloud, and I looked at it, and it was 11 years old. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, yep, it's happened. We have completed the melodic house life cycle. And, but, you know, I have no complaints. I think it's great. Another artist to watch is sixnite, if I'm saying that correctly. Just incredible music. Kind of has a very similar vibe to it. Yeah, really, really big fan there. So aside from melodic house, digging a little deeper before we go off the deep end, this new track, R to Me by Bless and Tchami. I think this is Tchami's best record in the last 5 years since COVID, in my opinion. This is summer, Euro house is back. We're so back. All right, following that up, we've got poster child of the UK house scene right now, Notion. This song TENTEN is unreal. It's also got a killer video behind it too. Unreal. Highly recommend TENTEN by Notion. Another track of his you guys might really like is Temporary Friends. Absolutely incredible. You guys probably heard his song The Days. It blew up on Instagram. It kind of became like the snowboarding song the last few months. So got that one a lot, but yeah, good to see him get some recognition there. And then another song I'm gonna highlight is Paralysis by KLOUD off of his new EP. Highly recommend. As always, I think techno is always just in different ways. Sometimes we have more of the harder hitting European techno. Sometimes we kind of get, the American, I call it like college techno. And it goes back and forth, but I'm just loving this hard hitting track Paralysis by KLOUD. Just to flow us right into the next thing, we have ZEET Noise by Skrillex. If you guys haven't listened to his album, I highly, highly recommend it. The format is really interesting. All the songs flow into each other. They're very short. Some of them are under 2 minutes. And it feels more like a mixtape of like these older, nostalgic, but also harder hitting, blending, techno, dubstep, hardstyle, just everything under the sun, really crossing genres and blending styles and sounds together. He's just a master. But highly recommend. If you liked Paralysis by KLOUD, you'll love ZEET Noise. It's kind of a more muted lo-fi take on hard-hitting organic techno. Another interesting trend I want to talk about is this infusion of car culture and deep house music. There's the song NIGHTRUNNERS by Memortal, which is just this incredibly melodic, nostalgic, sounds like it was on lo-fi tapes. It's like they made the song and then just recorded it on cassette, or you're like, filming the song on VHS. It's got that street kind of 90s grunge vibe to it. And you have these other songs like Nights by Memortal, and a whole genre. I'm seeing a whole bunch of guys really embrace this sound, blending the lines between what genres we actually like. And there's room for everyone. There's room for everyone in this game. It seems to be this like positive sum game making it to the mainstream, right? Everything we thought was underground is now getting tons and tons of attention. And there's not just dozens, but hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of artists in all of these microcosms, whether that be, the melodic house world, or you have the hardstyle game, or the techno, or trap, and all these different areas. Everyone's succeeding, and it's really cool to see. Before we go into some of the harder genres, I want to highlight this song by akiaura called 663 Mistrust. This to me feels like the postmodern version of what funk and melodic house turned into. It's kind of this heavier hitting, more atmospheric, cinematic, might I say, version. Absolutely incredible song. Love the build here. I used to think songs like this were just one-offs on Instagram and TikTok, and there are so many artists that have embraced this sound. For instance, LONOWN, we have this track Breathe, which is a slow version. Everyone's got a hot take on whether the slowed, ultra slowed. The other day I saw a mega slowed song, and I don't see people highlighting these artists. It's almost like they don't exist, but there's hundreds of them, and they're all collaborating with each other in this really interesting way. So Breathe is a huge track. This would make a killer edit. Just listening to this in the car, like you just feel dialed in. On top of that, I think a lot of this sound branched from, how do you say it, like montage funk, the offshoot of like Brazilian funk, right? It's like the montage-esque TikTok, Instagram. It's more about the feeling that it invokes than like, oh, this is a beautiful melody or this. And a lot of times these songs have like hyper melodies to them, and they're all sped up, and it's really intense and in your face. Another one I wanted to throw on your radar is One More Time by DJ Anemia. You might recognize this one. Oh, what is this? I actually used this song as the director's cut of the Celsius piece I put out recently, which is the last YouTube video. And yeah, I love how heavy hitting this music is. They're all so similar sounding from the outside, but when you really dig into them, there's a lot to this type of music. And it's really opened my eyes to kind of blending genres and understanding what's possible in the music world. So absolutely love that. Another really underground artist right now I want to highlight. I'm not exactly sure how to say this. I think it's Hiru, blending the genres between like a hard style and a jump style beat, but doing it in a way just like Memortal is on his tracks like Night Runner and Nights, where we get this kind of cassette lo-fi aesthetic to harder hitting music, right? So we have jump style and this collaboration on this track, HeavyLove.QAZ. Absolutely love this track, and I believe there's like a slowed and sped up version of it too. And then you have more of like the classic early 2000s jump style. You have a song by DJ Homicide, which is offline minus 2009.mp3, right? You're seeing all these guys put .mp3, .qaz, .mp4. It's like the raw, unfiltered, but we're seeing it, and these songs are huge. They're massive. You would have never thought that these tracks would be where they are. All right, and then to bridge us, a really interesting highlight I want to talk about is a newer artist, Voda Fuji, creating this melodic, just absolute banger. I Know You.
Cut it by fair. I need like 30 a year. Let's make it clear. Flipping a 4x4. For me, my brother's war.
I am in love with this song, and I love the way that he's presenting it on Instagram as well. This, for me, kind of classifies more of a shift towards the artist than the art itself, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. But this, to me, feels like what hyperpop used to be, right? You used to have guys in the underground scene like Glaive or Eric Doa as like the front runners of hyperpop. And a lot of those artists have kind of disappeared over the years. And I'm seeing this kind of middle ground, melodic, trap styled, like, for instance, Scrim is a new artist on the scene. His song Maserati Slick is unreal. It's
I just hopped down.
been in my top 5 for probably the last year, but it's all melody. Yeah, seeing that tons and tons and tons with newer artists. And then again, this just kind of reminds me of something Yeet was onto with his song How It Go. I'll just play this one out. Anyway, just really interesting to see how these repetitive melodies are just as catchy as some of these like full breakdown tracks. And to be honest, I end up finding myself on repeat on these songs more than any other ones. It's just kind of hard hitting from the get, melody through and through, and I just run it on repeat all day. To wrap up some of the music part of this, there's no guilty pleasures. You like what you like. And yeah, some of these are stretching my mind on what music is and what's possible. You know, one statement I'll stand by is that the future of creativity is curation, right? Something I'm seeing more and more and more. It's more about curating an aesthetic and then bridging people into these larger story projects, all this and that. For instance, here's this piece I found the other day by Ralph Marina. And how interesting is this? It's just this like montage of moments. It's got this kind of anti-design, quick flash aesthetic to it, but not in a way that I was dogging on some of the flash frames earlier. This is, here's all these aesthetics, here's all these vibes and things just thrown in your face. Yeah, I think this is fascinating. People are using stuff like this to promote their clothing brands. It's got this heavy emphasis on graphic design or like anti-design. Let me see, there was one I saw last night that was really fascinating. How interesting. It's like hitting on like the liminal space, nostalgic, fast, quick. Anyway, I really like that. I think it's interesting, it's unique. We've got this one by Milford here, which is kind of like a dark liminal space vibe. And it's got this like big world feel to it. It's all of a sudden making his music, making his brand, making his world feel bigger than it is. He's not even in it. It's just these curated elements structured back to back to back to back. Anyway, I'm not trying to understand it. I'm just trying to observe it and see what's working and just understand what we want to actually take and pick out of these different works to incorporate into our own work or to give us new ideas, right? Anything's on offer. I'm trying to just get away from this like structured, like, oh, it's got to be this. You've got to take inspo from the other commercial pieces. Like, inspiration comes from anywhere. Inspiration can come from movies. It can come from the tree outside. It can come from you heard some random noise. Like, you often hear music producers are like, oh, I'm in the subway and I just heard this noise. And then that like sparked this whole idea for a song. And it's so true. And so kind of touching on the nostalgic elements, I want to touch on art direction. I found this piece by Realm Vane. He has all these folders out next to him laying down on the ground. And I think this is so creative. I think this really well combines the kind of nostalgic, lo-fi, graphic design, anti-design core without going overboard. So we have all these folders next to him and all the files scattered about. And then this other one where it's this like more of a fashion pick that reminds you of like the super hard street fits, but it's Minecraft. You have all of the stuff from you have all the blocks that you've collected floating out next to you. You know, whenever you get killed in Minecraft, all your stuff is all over the ground. And I think this is just a really interesting play on the 2D world into the 3D. It's done in a really tasteful way, and I think this with some like really good sound design could bring it home. Like, absolutely amazing. Then there was this other piece I found, and this isn't necessarily a work of art or like any type of media. I don't even know where this is actually, but it's this piece by the Instagram is Monumental Labs, right? So you have a robot crafting the structure. It looks like some like Roman or Greek statue. Just the combination of these two aesthetics, right? You have kind of like the hyper 3D realism core, and you have the organic materials. I just think it's really fascinating. So take it for what you will. Another thing, earlier when we were talking about devices, incorporating devices into our work, creating things that are organic. There's this piece by Roland Ronick, right, called Reverse Sun. I found this gem on Instagram. And he has this shot, right? There's all these really organic textures. It's like where the camera's moving through honey and these psychedelic worlds. And then there's this shot where he's looking up and observing the sun in a room. And it's done so incredibly well. And the 3D artist needs a raise on this one, quite frankly. This is some really great work. But I just love this idea of like a sun in the room. It's beautifully done. Another interesting image I saw this week is flowers captured in ice with this like blue backdrop. I think this is fascinating. It kind of hits on the senses and also has this organic element to it, just like the last ones. And then boom, just kind of as an aesthetic bonus here, who doesn't love a greenhouse, right? We got the hexagonal shapes, or however you say that. Yeah, I just love this. I think this is really unique. Like, imagine combining all these elements where it's like, imagine there's ice in here and then there's the sun, or it could be cold. Just taking these elements, I'm just kind of putting these in backlog. Oh, you know, these are really interesting aesthetics. I might come back to these and use these whenever I'm crafting other ideas or crafting large landscapes. So for instance, I love this film, Storytell 1984. Yeah, there's these shots here in the center where, you know, in this piece, we're establishing the world. We see the buildings. We're not hiding anything, right? There's a full world happening, kind of moving between scenes. And this is just interesting and intriguing for me to think about concepts on a bigger level. How could I build a world for the characters or the commercial work that isn't just so confined, right? Oftentimes we think about things in being contained in a studio or shots of our characters, but here they built the world and we only had one character doing one action, and it says so much. Again, really, really like that. I just want to touch on color for a second. Something I'm incredibly inspired by right now is just really genuine skin tones, right? Seeing a really solid split in the skin, giving us not like it's some kind of hard teal and orange or film split, but almost feeling like, whoa, it's like hiding the grade beneath the image, which is great. I think another thing that I still think is in is the 500T look is always in my opinion. Just done really well. I love in a color grade, the blacks dropped all the way down. So I love seeing that still in color. But yeah, really trying to encapsulate this kind of hyper-realistic edge to color grading, keeping it stylized, and not trying to hide anything. So, all right, now that we're through some of the aesthetics, I want to talk about trends and things that I'm seeing on YouTube, on Instagram. This first one, while being in and out at the same time, I think that talking head content is still in. I still think it's a thing that I want to see more of on Instagram because I think it gives us a really genuine point of view of the artist. And I think we're always going to connect with that more than just like, hey, watch this. Here's an ad. It feels very off-putting in a lot of ways. So I think we'll always prefer a human touch to the art. But I think one trend I would love to see go is the kind of fake, like I'm on a podcast, like talking off screen, or I have like this mic over here and it's just like a 9x16. I'm like, oh, and then I blah, 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 blah. It's kind of like then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I'm just kind of tired of seeing it, to be honest, and I feel like it ends up just being a bunch of fluff. I understand it's like, can kind of like give this appeal to authority, but I think people are going to connect with just a more genuine talking to the camera, like I'm just talking to you guys. What I'm trying to say is it comes across as inauthentic sometimes, and I've seen too much of it feeling inauthentic that I would like to see that evolve in some way. That leads right into the next point. I think on YouTube and Instagram, hyper educational content is in. It's in. Who am I talking? There's so much value in these longer format pieces. And even on Instagram, like compacting a lot of information, really helpful information, just telling it as it is. Like, hey, here's this, being honest. Hey, if you want to do this, just do this, this, and this. That feels really natural to me. I'm even seeing in the fitness world, right? You have guys like Chris Bumstead and Sam Sulek who are massive, and they're sitting down doing these like drawing videos of like, hey, here's like how to cut your fat and lose weight from dropping calories. And it's like, dude, they don't need to do that, but they're doing it, and it's really helpful. And I think a lot of people are seeing the authenticity in someone's perspective as opposed to, oh, I'm just this guy, I don't do that kind of thing. And that's what this is. I'm trying to just help you guys, and these are videos I wish I had. I wish I could have seen myself talking about this stuff, and I would have found it so interesting. Whether or not you're into the music taste or you even like the creative direction things that I put up, they're unique. I think all of us have a unique take on things and a unique spin that really makes us special. And that goes into my next point, is it sharing your inspiration? I don't think it's taking away from anything. I can show you all these things, and maybe you'll adopt a few things, but same with you. If you showed me your inspirations, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I might think some things are cool. I may be able to connect the dots in a new way. I just don't think there's anything that you can take away by oversharing too much, especially if it's educational, and especially if it entertains, and especially if it does both. So yeah, really interesting trend to see, highlighting that Sam Sulek video where he's sitting down like drawing how to do something. It's like, dude, like this is what's working right now. I think it's really fascinating. And I think it takes nothing away from educational content either. People saying like, oh, when you drop this information, it's taking away from the courses and this and then that. Again, it's not about the work. It's about the artist, right? It's about your personal system for doing things. It's not, here's how to use DaVinci. It's here's how to create a style in DaVinci, right? Here's how we sign our signature on something. Here's how we make original ideas. And I just don't think that sharing any of this stuff, I can show you exactly how to do everything I do, and it might be helpful in a lot of ways, but it's not going to get you there. Ultimately, you have to be the one to put in the effort, and that gives me a lot of hope because I love talking about this stuff, but I know this is not taking away from anything that I do, and if it can help you guys in any way, I'm here for all of it, seriously. The next thing I think is I think we're seeing a shift from authenticity being portfolio-based to being articulate based. And what I mean by that is it's so obvious when you watch someone's work or you read someone's work or anything, how articulate they are at their craft. And when they talk, how they dispel information is everything. And it's one of the reasons like I love working on trying to be more articulate. For instance, your boy puts out a newsletter, The Creative Approach. If you want that, it's below. It helps me understand what ideas are worth sharing. And through that, it gives me the authority to talk about things in a very clear way. Anyway, I just don't see any downside to being more articulate. I think it's the number one skill that we could be learning at any point. Okay, you have a filmmaker, and you have a filmmaker who's a great filmmaker and articulate. It's like, dude, like we only have so few skills of how we put things out into the world, and speaking and writing is of the most important. So anyway, you guys have heard me go on about this before. I'm not going to dig into it too much. Again, I'm going to make another prediction. one trend I see with some of this, I call it like micro content on Instagram. My bet for the near-term future is micro content paired with long-form educational content. I think there is so much behind every single curtain, no matter how small it is. I find the smallest things, the most minute things, so interesting, and I want to hear everyone's perspective on everything, right? Like, oh, why did you make that creative decision? Oh, interesting, I've never seen it done in that certain way. And for me, I'm viewing this as kind of my lens on how to put out work, as this is a concept of me sharing aesthetic hot takes and different elements of what I think make great production work or great music or this and that. And it doesn't need to be some overly grand thing that took 6 months. That's what my bet's on right now, and I'm really loving making these videos. All right, let's go back to something a little more tangible. Vimeo. I think it's been the staple for filmmakers. I think it's dead. I think Vimeo, unless someone opens up the defibrillators and punches Vimeo on the chest, gives it electrical shock to the heart, I think it's gone. I think they've completely rebranded it, don't want to be a part of the film world anymore, which is a shame. You know, growing up seeing Vimeo staff pics, keeping all of my work on there. Yeah, it's a shame to see it go. I don't know what's going to take its place, but I think it's dead. I see more and more people talk about how it's just not relevant anymore. Let's kind of wrap it up here. So let's talk about Instagram as a portfolio. I think is out. Woo, hot take. Something I've thought for years and years and years and years and years. I think it's a mix of portfolio and sharing your personal taste. Again, going back to my thesis of, you know, we're leaning more towards the artist than the art itself. I think if we can see a healthy mix of your work and how you go about creating that work, we just consume things so much faster. Legacy pieces for me live on my website, they'll be on YouTube, but I just don't think Instagram is the place for that. It's not built for that, in my opinion, which is a hard pill to swallow. It took me a long time to kind of come to terms with. Yeah, I think just caring less about how things are perceived is always more beneficial. Look who's talking here, right? Kind of crazy, but okay. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, again, these are very broad, controversial topics, but you know, I just made a list of things I wanted to kind of ruffle some feathers with. So something going back to the whole film aesthetic and film emulation and doing this and that, it's kind of appearing effortless, right? I think the whole VHS vibe that we got is like, oh, everything's on VHS cam. Going back again to the least common denominator, or like the lowest hanging fruit, I'm starting to see things like that get oversaturated as far as what we're seeing online. I think it used to be cool not to try, right? It's like the flash pick, kind of blurry, kind of this, kind of that. I think we're seeing trying coming back into the limelight again, and I think this is the natural life cycle of all creative things. Oh, I'm just this filmmaker that has this really nonchalant style, and this is in, and ultimately I'm starting to see things shift back in the other direction, where it actually is really cool to try again and put a lot of effort into something, because I think that quality is one of the only pattern interrupts that we have, right? We notice quality, and in a sea of noise and just more filmmakers and musicians and artists at large, yes, things have never looked more the same, but I also think it's never been easier to stand out. I love seeing where things are going. I love trying to see why we make the decisions that we do in our work. And all of these things for me are just building blocks. And you know, these will probably change in a week or two. I'll be inspired by something entirely different, or maybe my opinion will change, but that's the beauty of it. And viewing everything as like a holistic practice. How you do anything is how you do everything. It's incredibly trite, but it's true. You know, they always say like theory is only good for context, but context is incredibly important. With all of these things, I would have never thought to see some of the genres that are popping out now that didn't exist years and years ago, and we're gonna see the same thing happen. There's just gonna be this like disillusionment of genres. Everything is gonna blend together, and I'm here for all of it. And I could not be more excited where things are going creatively. The world is open, there is space for everyone, and it has never been easier to stand out, and I think it's gonna continue to get easier. The more people come into this space, the more of a demand, the more attention, the easier it is to run your business, the easier it is to get clients, to work with good clients, to connect with other people. I've watched this thing grow over 8, 9, 10 years, in this industry. We are at such a pivotal point of everything changing. I'm excited to keep talking about these things, to connect with you guys, to help educate where I can, and get feedback from you guys on what you guys want to see and where we want to take and drive this ship. Anyways, I'm going to get back to it. I'll catch you guys in the next one.